My name is Dr. Monica Prendergast. I'm a professor of drama education at the University of Victoria, and I'm the president of the Confederation of University Faculty Associations of British Columbia, or CUFA BC. CUFA BC is the provincial voice for more than 5,500 university professors, instructors, lecturers, and academic librarians at 5 research universities across the province. We work with the faculty associations at Royal Roads University, Simon Fraser University, the University of British Columbia, University of Northern British Columbia, and the University of Victoria. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which CUFA BC's office resides is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. We acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Stolo nations. We are here today to present the winners of the CUFA BC Distinguished Academics Awards. These awards honor the outstanding scholarship and public policy contributions of distinguished academics in British Columbia. Academics whose scholarly activity have made significant contributions to the community beyond the academy. Faculty members in BC's universities engage in outstanding scholarship that shapes new discoveries and deepens our understanding of the world. While much of this work happens beyond the public eye, it has far-reaching impacts on policy, technology, and society. The Distinguished Academics Awards provide a platform to acknowledge the invaluable role of university research in our communities. I am pleased to present the group winners of the CUFA BC Paz Butadol Career Achievement Award to Dr. Philip Owens and Dr. Ellen Petticrew. This award recognizes contributions to the community over a lifelong career dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, truth, advocacy, and building community and relationships. Dr. Owens and Petticrew join us today to talk about their research.
My name is Phil Owens. I'm a professor in the Department of Geography, Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Northern British Columbia, and also the Forest Renewal British Columbia Endowed Chair in Landscape Ecology.
And I'm Ellen Petticrew. I'm also a faculty member, professor in the Geography, Earth and Environmental Science program at the University of Northern British Columbia and co-chair of the Forest Renewal BC endowment.
Can you tell me about your research interests?
Well, we're aquatic scientists and we're interested in how landscapes respond to a variety of disturbances, including climate change, so things like atmospheric rivers, wildfires, increased precipitation, and also modifications on the landscapes by human activity. That could be urbanization, agriculture, and mining.
Dr. Petticrew.
Yeah, the emphasis on landscape disturbances, the kind of linkages between both climate change, which has a large-scale impact on much of the world, but in northern British Columbia as well, in combination with landscape disturbances or land use, which the examples of agriculture, mining, forestry, those types of things have been a big focus of our work.
Your nominators described your having made profound and cumulative contributions to environmental conservation and management over 3 decades. Can you tell me about your work in this field and how you challenge the most significant issues facing landscape ecology?
Well, a lot of the research that's gone on to date has typically focused on certain aspects. One of the things that we bring to the table, perhaps more than others, is how landscapes behave more holistically and in an integrated way. So this idea that they move water, sediment, chemicals and nutrients between different elements of the landscape, from small-scale hill slopes to large-scale river basins, is where we can sort of provide the greatest contribution to science.
Yeah, and Phil and I have both, over about 3 decades, started off in from different directions and then come to work on the role of change in these large-scale watersheds. But I started off working in smaller watersheds, looking at lake issues, problems with communities that had problems with eutrophication or some kind of disturbance associated with usage, whether it's recreation or industrial uses on lakes. And Phil started more looking at sediments moving in river systems and tracing back the origin of where these erosive materials were coming from, and then looking at management solutions to deal with them. So both of us have really looked at a scientific component and then tried to come back to a management way of dealing with the issues that were identified.
Thank you. You have a remarkable record of receiving nearly $30 million in research funding over your career. That's an incredible amount of money. You've used some of this funding to study long-term environmental impacts of Canadian mining disasters. Can you tell me about your work on the Mount Polley Mine disaster?
So Mount Polley mining disaster happened in 2014, August of 2014. And we were already working at the field station, the Quesnel River Research Center, that's associated with the University of Northern BC, and it's outside of a small town called Lakely. So it's on the Quesnel River. So the research station is set up. We were working as within the endowment that funds our chairs, but also deals with the managing the new research station. So we were there, and the spill happened just a few kilometers upstream in the Quesnel Lake. So we were ready to deal with that, because we had some background information about the location and what was going on in the aquatic systems in some of the rivers. But we also had the facilities like boats and people to get out and do stuff. But just when it happened, we were there and able to deal with it. We had graduate students in place that rallied everybody together to come down, and we were able to get on the lake on the day that it happened at 1 o'clock in the morning. We were able to get on the lake that afternoon and start some sampling. But the real issue that we had with dealing with some of the mining problems like this was that it was a catastrophe that nobody was expecting. The community was stunned by it. The response had to be quick, and yet there was no funding available for researchers who were trying to deal with something like this. So federal government could respond to it in their way, provincial governments could respond to it, but there was nothing for independent researchers to get out and do things. So this was a bit of a stalling point in terms of us being able to continue to do work. So we needed to be able to fund it. So when you mentioned the $30 million, between us, the grants that we've been on sum up to that, but it's usually with part of a larger group that we're just a part of a group, and maybe not the lead investigators. And so big, for example, one was a $10 million grant to study the role of the Nelson River and in the inputs of that river system into the Hudson's Bay, and that was based out of the University of Manitoba. And so that was a big part of it, but we've also had several grants, of which the money that we got from Mount Polley focused on coming from the Canadian government, Environment and Climate Change Canada, through their environmental damages funds. So we have about $1.5 million that funded a group of us to work on that over a period of about 8 years, and then we've continued to get some smaller amounts of funding from different places to continue that work. So we've been doing that work on Mount Polley impacts for about a decade. Did you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, so obviously it was a incredibly large disaster at the time. It was the largest mine disaster in the world, and certainly the largest in Canadian history. It was a larger spill in Brazil in 2015, but it's still the second largest mine spill in the world. And one of the ways we've been able to contribute to that is because of the fact that we had an understanding of how that watershed functions through the work that we had been doing for the sort of the decade prior to it. We were able to provide some new insight to how the mine tailings spills were going to move within that aquatic environment. So for example, some early work that UNBC and partners like Department of Fisheries and Oceans had done on the lake showed that the lake has an unusual pattern in the way that it moves water both up lake and down lake according to the physics of how the water in the lake behaves through seiching and wind effects. So for example, we knew that a lot of the tailings that were going to go into the lake were going to go actually up the lake against the hydraulic gradient, which is unusual because everyone thought it was just going to flow into the lake and potentially down into the Quesnel River. But so we were able to offer new sight, and then because of the fact that we've been monitoring it over this 10-year period, again, we've been able to document the response, the environment, particularly the lake and the aquatic ecosystem, and provide that back to the local community, who otherwise really don't have the resources to understand what's going on essentially in their backyard. So that's been we feel, a major contribution to the local communities. And we must recognize that the University of Northern British Columbia played a big role in that by supporting us over the 10 years and providing us some with initial funds, because to get that project up and going on the day of the spill, required a lot of infrastructure and support, and the university stepped in, recognizing that as a university in the local area, it had a moral responsibility to help the community and also the government agencies who are interested to try and understand what's gone on. So it's been a really rewarding project to be able to contribute back to the community on what's been going on.
So, Dr. Petticrew, you've co-published research with an interdisciplinary team about integrating across knowledge systems to develop a holistic understanding of climate change, watershed security, health, and well-being. Your nominators describe you as being a leading influencer in the global academic field of geography, and even describing your mentorship as selfless and for the betterment of science, developing scientists and the public. Why is it important to you to engage in research that's in the public interest?
I think from very early on, the work that I started doing in lakes always dealt with communities' use of lakes. And when I first moved to Prince George in 1993, when the university, just before it opened its main campus, there was a major lake spill there was a major fish die-off in a local lake called Tabor Lake. And the community had no idea what had caused it, but they had lost a lot of fish. There was a concern that there was a poisoning. There was concern that it was an unknown response to a local lake that they use. Some people use them for drinking water. Some people use it for recreation. So the community was very interested in getting some explanation for this. And as I arrived in mid-August, and this happened in late August. So it was a really quick response time to be able to deal with a local issue. So my first big project at UNBC was working on Tabor Lake, and I continued to work with the community and the community, the cooperative team of community members who were in responding to this lake problem. To help them try to figure out what the scientific issues were. And so it did turn out that the fish die-off was not because of some kind of chemical poisoning, but just the lack of oxygen and the dieback of a large plant population in the lake at the end of August used up the oxygen where the fish were, and these fish died. And so we ended up having to try to look at the role of nutrients in the lake and how to manage those nutrients over time, so that they could have less biological growth in the lake of both weeds as well as phytoplankton. And it's still a problem. In the north, we have an environment that has a lot of glaciolacustrine materials, a lot of clay-type materials that hold on to nutrients, and so that those nutrients just continue to recycle back in the lake, which means that managing that, it means not just what you put into the lake, but how you get things out of the lake. And so it has been a ongoing project that the people in that specific lake and then other lakes, which BC has a lake stewardship society, and they help individuals who want to sample their lakes and keep their lakes clean. They deal with a lot of these issues and provide advice and people to work with them on these different lakes. So it's rewarding to work with individuals, and also to try to look at the restoration or ways to deal with the restoration of lakes in the environment. We then moved on to a larger lake because of this field station being positioned on Quesnel Lake, and it's a completely different scale of system, but there's also lots of other lakes, and then of course we have local people using that water and wanting to maintain the lake, especially after the mine spill, which was a much larger scale disaster. So the role of community both at lakes but also in river systems, we've done a lot. Both of us have done a lot of work in the Nechako watershed, which is Prince George is where the Fraser and the Nechako meet, and so we've been working in that for more than a decade as well, looking at some of the impacts of the water regulation as well as climate change and things in that watershed.
So, Dr. Owens, your nominators have described your work as being a spectacular example of what can be achieved through collaboration, partnership, community, and innovation. Why is it important to you to engage in interdisciplinary and community-based research?
Well, I think we're at a time now where we're faced with some really big environmental problems, and they're greater than any one person or any individual group, organization can deal with. So I think we're at a point in time where we have to come together collectively to address these global problems. And I'm pretty, I have a philosophy by there's people out there who can address these problems, and unless they're brought into the equation, we're never going to be able to move forward. So we have to bring in everyone. Everyone has a role to play in understanding these global environmental problems that we're faced with. So one of the examples that I'm working on at the moment is to do with wildfire. I think we're all concerned with wildfire, particularly in Western North America, and British Columbia has had some really bad wildfire years since about 2017. And the forecasts are that things are not going to get better soon. 2023 was the worst wildfire in BC and Canadian history. So there's a project that I'm working on at the moment, which is led by the Owens Indian Band, and we're trying to understand how, given wildfires, we can, as a collaborative group of people, come together to try and protect landscapes and aquatic habitats from these big devastating wildfires. So the Owens Indian Band project is a collaborative effort between 3 universities in British Columbia. It's Ministry of Forests, it's Owens Indian Band, it's Department of Fisheries and Oceans, it's the Pacific Salmon Foundation, the Aquatic Fisheries Commission. We've also got a variety of consultancy companies. So it's a wonderful example of all those organizations coming together to try and collectively understand what is a really significant issue on the BC landscape. And what's exciting about this project is that it's bringing in culturally relevant ways to manage the landscape following fire. So it's not just doing things that we did in the past, it's very forward-looking, and it's trying to use Indigenous knowledge, ideas, along with those provided by the scientific community and the provincial government, to try and really understand how the landscapes are functioning, how they're likely to function over time, how we can protect them to ensure fish habitat is suitable, and also protect water resources. And it's these sort of collaborative projects that I find the most exciting, because I find that I learn a lot from them as well. I feel I can contribute to them. I have a role I can play because I have some scientific knowledge that I can understand and some technical expertise, but it's also, I find them really rewarding because I learn so much, and I find it very engaging to work with these different organizations. So certainly that that's one example. Another example is whereby in many parts of the world there are problems of soil erosion, and that causes problems of loss of fertile land. And then when you get soil erosion, you get all that sediment being delivered to river systems, and it can be a problem for drinking water or aquatic ecosystems. So trying to understand where that sediment is coming from is a really helpful way of sort of being effective in targeting problem areas. So I've been working with a group of scientists working with the International Atomic Energy Agency, where we're trying to look at developing innovative tracers so we can find out where sediment and problem chemicals are coming from in the landscape due to erosion, due to human activities, as well as things as wildfire. And the idea there is to sort of try and roll it out to parts of the world, including countries in South America and Africa and places like that, where we can provide some sort of guidance as to how local communities can identify where problem sediment is coming from and problem chemicals, and then try and stop that from getting into waterways. So again, it's really valuable knowing that the scientific knowledge that the community in universities can assemble is being rolled out to sort of address real world problems.
So we focus mainly on your research, but you're also teachers who take an active role in training and mentoring students. One of your nominators said that you are recognized as outstanding mentors whose graduate students have received the Governor General Gold Medal. You've supervised, together I guess, over 52 graduate students, 6 postdocs, 42 research assistants, and undergraduate trainees. In your teaching, what is the most important message you want your students to take away from their studies with you? Start with Dr. Petticrew.
Yes, the number of students is quite impressive when you look at that over that length of time. And I mean, the real value of doing this type of job, the real value is being able to interact with youth and then seeing them develop and go into positions throughout their careers. And we've had 3 gold medal winners, which is really impressive over in that time, and very impressive students, which has been a real pleasure. With the people coming in, we have a variety of people apply from all over the world, but they also apply from local, and we also train students that are coming through our undergraduate, which the university brings in to UNBC. So that while it is a university in the north and for the north, it gets a broader group of students coming in, which allows us then to have a mix of students to have as undergraduate students that are both in our projects, whether it be at the Quesnel River Research Center or at other projects in the Nechako or in Hudson's Bay, that type of area. So it's great for us to be able to give them that experiential learning and have hands-on experience as both an undergraduate and then possibly them going on into graduate school or them working with graduate students and getting some experience. So it's wonderful for them to be able to see the opportunities that come from doing environmental work, and then to be able to see as they go through the different levels of graduate programs and or postdocs, what they're capable of doing. Several of them have gone on to be academics in different environments, and others have gone in to do work with consulting companies. But for the most part, most of our students have stayed in the environmental field, which has been pleasing as well.
Dr. Owens.
Well, I mean, given the nature of the work we do, it tends to be a lot of field work, and it tends to all be at about the same point in time, given the fact that where we are, snow dominates the landscape for several months. So we need those graduate students, we need those undergraduate students and research assistants to help us with our work. It would be impossible for us to do the amount of work that we're presently doing without them. It's really a two-way process. You know, we're working in different watersheds in the province, from the Nechako to the Quesnel to the Dead Man near Kamloops and other parts of the province. So, you know, it's great to have a team working with us in these different parts of the landscape of British Columbia. And, you know, University of Northern British Columbia prides itself on trying to immerse its undergraduate students in an experiential learning environment. So we work with undergraduate students at the Quesnel River Research Center. For example, each year we have several of them helping with the graduate students and the research activities that are going on there. And it's rewarding to see that experience that they gained by doing that. I know that when I was an undergraduate student, I had a similar experience. I know it was a transformative experience for me, and it's nice to be able to sort of impart that onto other undergraduate students, because you do see the change. You know, when they're doing things out in the field and they're working with high-level graduate students and postdocs, you can see the things clicking, and things they've learned in the classroom suddenly make sense, and you then see them and you can follow them on in their careers, seeing how they use those skills that they picked up during those years into their sort of new chapters of their life.
I imagine that's very rewarding.
It is.
For both of you. How does your work advance the calls to action in the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission report?
Well, one of the ways it can do that, the research we're doing can help First Nations understand some of these environmental disasters on their lands and their waters. So I talked about the work we're doing with the Skeetchison Indian Band, trying to understand wildfires. We've also been working with other First Nations in the province to try and understand these disasters, like the Mount Polley Mine disaster. We've been able to help Williams Lake First Nation and Hatsel First Nation understand the implications of that spill on their traditional territories and what it might mean for their culture and for the summer populations that they rely on so much for a variety of different reasons. We've been working with other First Nations in the Nechako watershed, for example, in trying to understand the effect of the building in the 1950s of the Nechako Reservoir and the Kenny Dam, and that's been a very controversial enterprise, and we've been able to help those First Nations understand the effects of that dam and other things like climate change on water resources, water security, and salmon populations in that watershed.
There's also a management aspect at the Quesnel River Research Center. We have a facility there that is used both by the university, but we also have opportunities to support fisheries in the province. And we have had a First Nations group that comes in to use what's called a Ditson counter, which is a fence that's put up to count the salmon returns in the fall. And so a group of First Nations people come in to do the coho response, do the coho counts. And so DFO is working with the First Nations to support the equipment, and then they bring in their people and spend time at the QRC for about a month following the sockeye run. And so we have the local community of both First Nations and the other local community have an interest in what's going on at the QRC and how we can support those things. But also we have an opportunity with a new grant that we have been given by the BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund which BC SHRIF, which will allow us to put a new building on site, and it's going to be completed by 2026 with the idea that we'll have both a teaching and a research facility, but also a place for workshops and outreach with an emphasis on some of the work that we do in the hatchery area of the Quesnel River Research Center, which supports both the development of young fish, raising eggs to young fish, and then the release of fish to sustain the salmon populations for the environments, not just in the Quesnel River watershed, but all of the northern part of the province. So the Upper Fraser Fisheries Conservation group, which is a group of First Nations in the northern part of the Fraser Basin, have been supporting us at this station, and we're supporting them with this idea of being able to raise these fish and then release them in some of the northern Fraser River stock areas, or the stocks for the Upper Fraser River. So it's been a nice relationship, and there'll be hopefully more opportunities to do that with this new building that should be completed in this next year or two.
Very exciting.
And a nice component that goes with that project that Ellen's just been talking about is that not only is there an emphasis on raising stocks of salmon through the hatchery component, but also the project also supports a very large research project, which is looking at how landscapes and watersheds in the province, with a focus on the Quesnel watershed as an example, respond to climate change stresses like floods and wildfires. So it's the Quesnel River Research Centre is providing this unique opportunity of both having a sort of a hatchery led by the sort of First Nations in the community through DFO, and also a very large science program to understand the effect of climate change on salmon populations and habitat in northern British Columbia.
Great, thank you. How does your work support equity, diversity, and inclusion in post-secondary education and scientific research?
Well, one of the ways it's able to do that is through the fact that decades ago, most of the universities in the province were located in the southern corner.
Yes.
And that prevented barriers, obviously financial and logistical, for a lot of people, potential students in the central and northern part of the province to access higher education. So through the University of Northern British Columbia being established in the early 90s, that provided a mechanism for students who could attend graduate education, post-undergraduate education, that might not always have had access to that. And that's expanded through them being able to sort of work with faculty in these amazing projects, not just the ones that we do, but all of our colleagues at the University of Northern British Columbia. So it's opened up opportunities that weren't there before.
Yeah, and I think that we've been able to encourage people from different backgrounds to come and work in our group. We don't have any barriers to bringing people into our research group, and so it's really an opportunity for them, if they're at the university and interested in learning about these types of environmental areas, then we welcome them. And so it's been kind of open access for folks that are interested.
Is there anything else that you would like to say to the nominators or to the CUFA BC Selection Committee?
Well, we were really pleased to be nominated, and we're very thankful. It was very nice to be able to think about these types of questions and put things into a larger perspective. You're very often focused on what you're currently doing or what you're going forward to do. So it's a nice opportunity to step back and look at that 3 decades of work and put it into perspective. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me today to talk about your work. I want to congratulate you both again on being awarded the CUFA 2025 CUFA BC Paz Butadol Career Achievement Award as part of our annual Distinguished Academics Award series. I look forward to following your continued successes at the University of Northern British Columbia.
Thank you.
Thank you.